Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, bark like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
My name is Theo Wilson. We're taking the biggest turning points in history and dissecting the lost surprises of what happened. You have to see it to believe it. And now you will.
I Was There with Theo Wilson, a new series on the History Channel.
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. This is Douglas Viviani. Unfortunately, David Cohen could not make it today, but I have a very special guest star, so to speak, our guest host that's going to be with us this week, Theo Wilson. He's an author, an actor, an activist, a social media force. He's the author of a book you may know, The Law of Action. It provides inspiration and challenges us to go out and do things to make things happen, if you will, to help others and yourself in life. He's done a TED Talk that garnered 17 million views and counting. It might be 17,000,001 at this point because I just saw it. And is the executive director of Shop Talk Live, an organization that empowers people through discussion that are held in barbershops, beauty salons, forums, and through various media venues. Shop Talk Live repairs or attempts to repair relationships and unifies communities. So there's a lot to talk about, but there's more than that. We're here on Everything Old is New Again, right? So we're talking entertainment in some shape or form, as well as history, and we will learn about that, but we're also going to go into a TV show that you just heard that I am in love with, if you will. I think it's the perfect situation to talk about this show on Everything Old is New Again. The show is called I Was There. Theo Wilson, welcome to Everything Old is New Again.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Douglas. Seriously, man. It's
my pleasure, and you're one of the few that responded immediately right away to us. I usually have to go through, publicists and this and that, and you were right on an email I had sent out, and I so appreciate that to show.
Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way. That to me shows, just to me from the outside looking in, that you're, of course, hosting this show, but I think you're very much into the show. It's a great show. Just to give a smidge of an idea for the audience here, tell us a little bit about what is I Was There.
Listen, man, I think everybody who's heard of a significant historical event will wonder at some point, what would they do if they were there? If you were in the people's shoes who it happened to. And so we decided to make a show around that. Committee Films reached out to me about this idea, and I was super grateful to at least be given the chance to audition for it. And we recreate from a granular level. We're talking about very detail-oriented reconstruction of historical events so that you get to see the place. You get to almost smell the atmosphere. You get to definitely look at the costumes and the human beings that were involved, and then we make it come alive. So I Was There is what you would do if you were there, and I get to be your guide through history.
And it's not only that, it is that, of course, but I'm going to modify that or add to that a little bit too, because it certainly teaches you about these events, because many of these events we hear and learn a little bit about, and we move on in school, or maybe we've just read a bit about it in book or growing up, whatever. But sometimes there's a story behind the story, like you did one the other night on Chernobyl. And the three individuals, I don't want to give it away, but we'll get there. But just as an aside, there were three individuals that basically saved humanity, or at least a large portion of humanity, and no one even knows their name. No one knows what they did. And your show brought that alive, named them, and in an honest, straightforward way presented their story. And I admire that so much. I think the audience may recognize this, and we'll talk about this in a minute.
400 or 500 feet into the sky, it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. It's smoke and it's flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity.
It's just a piece of a clip that I think we've all heard one point or another, and if you haven't, that is a reporter on the location of the Hindenburg Hindenburg as it caught fire and came burning down. And this is just for an introduction to the show, because that's something that I think everyone kind of has seen somewhere or another. Your show has you pulling on the moorings and talking about it, introducing it. Then you're inside the Hindenburg. You're talking about how big it was, how luxurious it was, why it was so important to the Nazis. And then you're smoking a cigar in a cigar room. So there's so much there that you're like, it's almost a mini movie. You're not just hearing someone as a historian tell you things. There are historians telling you the facts, but there's you as a young, vibrant man in there and saying, look, this is what it was like. Am I wrong?
Man, you're absolutely right. And it was such a gag. Just when you are in a place that is reconstructed from a historical event, you can't help but put yourself there first person. So that episode, the Hindenburg episode, was a lot of fun to film. So much green screen. I felt like I was in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We had, so those cigars were like imitation cigars, but they had like a real capacity to light them and smoke them, but they were herbs. And it was just disgusting. They didn't taste anything like the real cigars that people probably enjoy. But when you got a sense, when the extras are on set, the costume designers are so detail-oriented, you really slip into it, and they are like mini movies. This isn't like a lot of stuff on History Channel, though it's great. But they're like narrative versus this is experiential. You see what I'm saying? And even recreation from the past, and then you have me, who's your modern point of contact there. I have one of the best times filming every single last one of these episodes. So it's an exciting thing to share. So when you said I'm really into it, I really am, man. I cannot wait to have you guys experience this as well.
And that's why I wanted to bring you on the show right away, because our audience, as you probably know from the sound of our show, and I know you've listened to all 472 that are online.
Absolutely.
and of course on AM, FM radio every week. But what I'm kind of saying is our audience understands and acknowledges, and we celebrate history, and your sort of doing good works too, if you will, in that you are presenting stories that, well, it's not really a story, sometimes implies that it's not real, but these are real stories of real events. And like I said before, you're behind the scenes. I'm excited about what's upcoming as well. When I understand you're doing the death of Jesse James, you're doing some others, you did the Johnstown flood. I'm not sure anybody is even.
Salem witch trials.
That's
coming up. Oh man, we got Battle of Stalingrad coming up. We've got the St. Valentine's Day massacre with Al Capone coming up. Like, I'm talking about really heavy hitting stuff. We got the march at Edmund Pettus Bridge, Selma, the story and life of John Lewis coming up. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln is coming up. Like, man, like these are. These are so great. And what was so interesting was, so we filmed the death of Abraham Lincoln first. So let me tell you, this guy who plays Abraham Lincoln, his name's Robert Broski. Look him up at Lincoln Lives. I think it's lincolnlives.org or com. But this guy, we filmed it during COVID, so he had his mask on when he first came to set. Man, when he took that mask off, everybody just stopped. But he was sitting down. And I was like, okay, so you got the face, but do you have the height? Lincoln was our tallest president. Let me tell you something, man. Robert Broski stood up and he kept standing up. I mean, this guy, he's all of 6'4", and he's like skinny and gaunt. And he is Lincoln in a time machine. Come back. And it was just amazing. And I was like, did you always know you look like Abraham Lincoln? He said, dude, I worked at Home Depot. You know what I mean? And so now this is his life, and we were able to get him, and he is the best Abraham Lincoln reenactor in the country, and we got him. And so all of that stuff on set was so adventurous, and we went through it with our cast and crew, man, and we became really good friends as well. So just some really great energy, and it shows on camera.
And I guarantee you, if you watch, and you will watch after hearing this interview, you have to watch this show. When you tune into this show, it's not the same story of Abraham Lincoln dying, which is horrendous and horrific, of course, and we've all heard about it, and we've all seen it in different movies and so forth. But I guarantee you, and I haven't seen it yet, but I guarantee you, I Was There is going to add something to the facts of this event that you weren't aware of. Am I on base here a little bit?
See, okay, so I'm going to give you a little secret here. We're doing the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, but we're approaching it from John Wilkes Booth's point of view. And so this is something where a lot of people just don't really understand about the complexity of his background. We're going into his family life. We're going into sibling rivalry. Like, we're going into a whole lot of stuff that's just not generally discussed in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, because we don't heroize Booth in any type of way. We seek to understand the cause and effect, the chain of events. And in that chain of events, guess what we do? We elucidate the historical time period that it took place in. And one of the things I say is that one of the problems with teaching history is we teach it as history. It's not history. It was the present moment to those who were going through it. They were as much passengers to the unknown as we are. And so when you look at a show like I Was There, you're looking at the human elements that really went into making these monumental historical events. And you're right there with the people who are also grappling with the unknown. History was the present to those who lived it. And you really see that in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
I love that. That's perfect. We'll follow up on that with Theo Wilson. I Was There, History Channel, and everything old's new again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
In December of 1940, the War Department appropriated $1 million to build a suitable base to train black airmen at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama.
And World War II gave us a chance to go into combat units and do a first-class job so that the larger population would realize how silly and stupid segregation was.
Known to history as the Tuskegee Airmen. By war's end, the 332nd had downed 108 enemy aircraft, received 744 air medals, 150 distinguished flying crosses, 14 bronze stars, and 1 silver star.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. We are here with the host and star of I Was There on History Channel, Theo Wilson. Theo, tell me, why did I play that portion of history with you being on the show? You can do a better job than I can explaining all of that.
That is because I'm not the first person in my family to have the name Theo Wilson. My grandfather was Tuskegee Airman Theobald George Wilson of the 99th Airborne. And I remember when I was a kid hanging out with my grandpa. He lived in Brooklyn, New York, and he always had me around things that flew. Whether it was balsa wood airplanes he would give to me every time, airfields, taking me to like shows and talking about the P-51 Mustang. My grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman. It was so interesting because he never played up the significance of that. But my father, who was a historian, absolutely made sure that I understood that my grandfather was an American hero. And like Grandpa, he had been, way aged out of thinking that he was going to be honored by his service. There are a lot of black regiments that did heroic things in wars that don't get a lot of recognition. You know what I'm saying? You got Patton's Panthers, you got the Harlem Hellfighters, you got the last branch of the Buffalo Soldiers who fought in World War II, and you got the Tuskegee Airmen. And all that my grandpa knew was that he was just going to the Air Force after high school. That's all he knew, right? So it had just opened up to black troops, and he said, okay, well, let me figure out how to get a part of this. So he joined what he thought was just the 99th Airborne, which became a part of the Tuskegee Airmen program. And so that is one of those things that's so interesting about black history. He didn't really get honored for his service and who he was until like the last 20, 25 years of his life. They made that movie about the Tuskegee Airmen, starring, I believe, Cuba Gooding Jr. at that time. And I think Lawrence Fishburne was also in that movie. And suddenly, everybody cared about the Tuskegee Airmen. And it was luck of the draw because there were a lot of heroic black fighting regiments in different facets of the military who did great things. But it was the airmen who really got the spotlight. And that just happened to be my grandfather. Before I knew it, he's meeting all these presidents and he's shaking hands with guys. And he was in the front row of the last president he lived to see was Barack Obama. So he was at Obama's inauguration, and that's who my grandpa was.
And that's an amazing story. Think about what the changes in the world that he saw from a child until Barack Obama. We're not a political show, and we're not going to go there because that's what we do, but we have to acknowledge how amazing the world has changed. And, of course, there's more to go. There's no doubt. But he was part of the solution, and that's so admirable. And I assume that what you're saying also is when you learn that, history then becomes tangible to you. It's not just, like we're saying before, it's not just a name. It's not black and white pictures on a computer that you go, who are these people? You know, just as an aside, my wife's in Diary of Anne Frank, a play coming up. And she saw it was passed around, which would be another great topic, by the way, for I was there. There's a picture that was colorized of her and of Martin Luther King together, because we were approximately the same age. And the caption was something like we were saying, and it was, you know, I've colorized this to show you that these people lived a life in color just like you and I. These things were real. It's not just a movie and some historian, a dry 85-year-old historian talking down to you, kind of, you know? And that's what I love about your show also, I was there, is that you have historians, clips here and there, but your show makes it come alive like that. And I just want to go back to your grandfather again. So it must have been kind of a surprise to you, because he had this inclination, as you were saying, growing up, for the airmen and the, you know, the planes you throw around and so forth. And you never really knew until, how did it come out? In other words, how did it you become aware? When did he finally profess himself as being part of this great group to you?
Well, it wasn't much of a secret as much as it was when Grandpa. So I remember I had to have been in college when I started seeing Grandpa suddenly taking pictures with all of these people at these events, right? Now, I would say that when the Tuskegee Airmen movie came out, I might have been in middle school. I think I was in middle school when the Tuskegee Airmen movie came out. And that's when the profile started to rise. That's when all of a sudden, you know, my grandpa's at this event and that event, you know, shaking hands with Bush, you know what I mean? And he's here and he's there. And I think that by the time my sister graduated college in 2007, that's when I really saw the spotlight really starting to shine on my grandfather. And I'm trying not to get emotional about this, but on his very last birthday, January 10th, 2012, George Lucas sent him a limousine and all the surviving Tuskegee Airmen to go to the movie Red Tail's premiere. And in that premiere, red carpet treatment and the whole nine, Grandpa got a trading card. And if you look up Theobald G. Wilson, you can actually find his trading card that was made by George Lucas's company, and just kind of finally memorializing him. And that was his last birthday. He passed away in December of 2012. And I'm just thinking, man, like, had he passed away a year earlier, he wouldn't have finally got that final red carpet treatment that he deserved. And it was just, you see this happen and you just really get proud to be who you are. I didn't control who my grandpa was. You know what I mean? But when I was there, began to interview me about what I knew about history, I didn't realize I had such an unfair leg up almost. I had so much to offer. And this is an element that's out of my control, but I also do love history. And I'm glad and I'm very happy and grateful that I am a part of it because of my bloodline.
And also, it seems like your grandfather was a humble man that wasn't, you know, with his chest out every time he did something, but he was clearly a part of history. And I think that also, like, we all have a part of history. All of our ancestors, in some way or another, if we can get in touch with them, would see that inspiration. But you see it come to life. I think that's so inspirational. And on top of that, now, do you feel when you're doing this show, do you kind of feel like there are lots of other stories to be told besides my grandfather? Oh, yeah. And I want to kind of do them justice? Is that, I don't know, does that make any sense to you?
It does. The thing about history is that it contextualizes the present moment. You know, an elder of mine used to say the hand of the past writes the present, and nothing happens in a vacuum. And I think one of the things that we have to do as a culture and as a country is to really not shy away from the tougher parts of our history, because actually the dark spots in our history give us some measure to show how far we've come and how far we still need to go. And if we understand history as the present moment to those who lived it, then we get to take advantage of the patterns and lessons that history provides us so that we get to make the correct decisions in the history that's currently unfolding. And I think that's the value of it. So I Was There doesn't shy away from the tougher things. It actually goes into some rough details, but it does it in a way that like humanizes all of the actors involved and makes you realize this was the world they were given, and this is what different people made of that world. And that's how that world made this world.
Right, and those were their choices. It wasn't laid out for them. They didn't know, just because I mentioned Anne Frank. Anne Frank didn't know what was going to happen to her. She didn't know this diary, which was private to her, was ever going to be published, right? She didn't know what was, you know, like, so let's get, like you say, John Wilkes Booth did something that in his mind was the right thing to do. So maybe we need to learn, why did he think that that was right, and correct that thinking in the youth, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it certainly does, man.
So that's what I love about this show, because I've shown it to my kids, the first 2 episodes. They haven't seen the 3rd yet, and they're looking forward to it very much so. And my daughter said, you know, we do play in school. They have these smart boards, and they do play videos and little pieces of movies and things like that. And I said, there is no reason on the planet why, without commercials, I think it is 22 minutes. Am I allowed to say that? Because we do want to have to keep the commercials in if they do it. But there's no reason why the school could not show that in one period, and then the following period, you know, talk about that event. This is kind of what it's to me, probably an extra thing, is that you're able to bring this to a whole another generation, and its grandfather can watch your show, and the 3rd grader can watch the show together. Absolutely.
That's the beauty of it, you know. I wish there were shows more like this when I was coming up as a kid, you know, and I'm certainly happy that this show is strong, but it's palatable, right? It's got both elements. It's got truth, and it's got a brilliance to it that makes it accessible to all generations. And if this show is shown in schools, I will be humbled and flattered to be a part of education in this way. Because in a weird way, I'm like your history teacher, you know what I mean? And
how did you get here, kind of, right? You know?
Right. And so that's hopefully I'm like the coolest history teacher in America. That's like my goal when I was there.
Well, I'll tell you, they picked the right person too, because you're young, you're vibrant, you're strong, you're in shape, you speak well in terms of, you know, to everyone. The dialogue is not understandable. You're not talking above people, below people. You know, you're talking right to someone as if they're at a cocktail party. Hey, did you know what happened to the Hindenburg? And you kind of lay it out. Let's celebrate and talk more when we get back here on Everything Old is New Again. We're talking with Theo Wilson, and we're talking about I Was There on History Channel.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New Again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
This is Walter Cronkite. Watch for You Are There and another dramatization of one of history's great events by tuning to this channel tonight.
July 4th, 1776. The signing of the Declaration of Independence. You are there.
What sort of a day was it? A day like all days, filled with those events that alter and illuminate our time. And you were there.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. You are here with us, Theo Wilson, the host of I Was There, Douglas Viviani. We're talking about I Was There, which is a great show that's brand new on history. I tell you got to get involved with that, number one. Number two, as is the theme of Everything Old is New Again, we take a look at the past and what is the foundation of the entertainment that they're looking at today. Now, not only that, but what has or is the presentation of an older idea, let's say, that served as the foundation of something we're watching today, is it just a repeat, or is it improved upon? Is it done better and therefore makes its own way? That's what I think we can look at with I Was There. Certainly, you probably don't remember, maybe people do. There was a show called You Are There, and that was in the 1950s. It was originally on the radio, actually, and then Walter Cronkite brought it over in the 50s, and it kind of became a phenomenon at one point, because they took reporters and had the reporters stand and talk about these different events, and they recreated these events. But now with Theo Wilson, with the historians that you have some great historians on the show, and you also have, if you can do it, well, with Chernobyl, for example, you had eyewitnesses there, or at least contemporaries there, as well, to talk about these topics, and you've got the computer generation, and you've got yourself in the actual event itself. To me, I would respectfully suggest that You Are There is back, and a compliment, I think, to I Was There. It's not the same old thing. It's taking an older brush of an idea and really making it come alive and really improving upon it. Were you aware in any way, shape, or form of any past sort of kind of incarnation of You Are There before you got involved?
Not at all. But as soon as I got onto the project, there were all of these people on set, specifically a lot of the extras, the older extras. They all knew about You Were There, the radio show, and from Walter Cronkite. And we did talk about that, I believe, at the filming of the Salem witch trials is when we first had that discussion about You Were There. And I kind of looked it up a little bit, and I said, okay, well, I feel like this show takes you there in a way that they couldn't have dreamed of. The technology that we have today is, it would look like magic. It would look like they would think the things that we can do would be 200-300 years in the future, not just like 50 or 60 years. And so making this show come alive the way that it does, I think vivifies it for the media appetite of the consumers that we're reaching. Folks, I've seen, Marvel Infinity Wars, you know what I mean? And we've seen Avatar. And so you got to bring it up to date, to the quality that folks are used to, so that they can just sit back with their popcorn and get educated. And the feedback I'm getting for I Was There is that people's minds are blown at the details that we go into historically and how it really comes alive. The music and the way that they cut my narration just really captivates folks and teaches them at the same time. So I think we did a good service to the idea, and we really brought it home for 2022 and beyond. Yeah,
and I hope you take my would you say juxtaposition of the two as a compliment, and I'm really agree with you on that. And in addition, I'll say this one more time because it's important to me. Obviously I created a show and all that. For whatever it's worth, I love history as well. We talk about it many times, whether it's mostly entertainment history, but of course bleeds over into pop culture and so forth all the time. And we've talked about the Egyptian civilizations till now. And so we are there with you, but you, as we've tried to do, we do it sometimes with quizzes, with characters, with special guests like Dr. Peter Weller, who is RoboCop, and he's very much into art and Roman art and so forth, and Renaissance art, and we've had Dr. Bob Breyer, who's the Egyptologist that's called Mr. Mummy because he's created the only one that's created a mummy real life for the last 2,000 years and so forth. So my point is though that you're doing this in a way that I don't care if you listening and you say, I know the story of the Salem witch trials. You will not believe it, but in 22 minutes of viewing, you're going to learn at least one more thing. And by the way, because of the way it's presented, you're going to remember that. I hope I'm presenting it the right way. Or is that something you can agree with?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And I think what's so cool about this is that when you talk about what makes this show unique, it really is the people. The Salem Witch Trials episode, we not only go into who the main characters were, a lot of us know who they are, but we also go into what Puritan life was like. You know what I mean? Really on the ground to how much their outfits weighed on them, like what it was like to have to farm in certain weather. How the American experiment was very, very uncertain at the time. And that uncertainty led to certain existential fears given the religious context of the Puritans, and how all of these factors coalesced in them interpreting seizures as possession. You see what I'm saying? And these are the things that we don't often talk about. We just talk about the burnings, which low-key weren't actually burnings. You see what I mean? And the ideas that float around that, we're really going back to the moment they happened and how the way that stuff was passed on by oral and written communication distorted them like a game of telephone. And then that makes the myth, and we deconstruct that in reverse. I love it. You're going to love that episode.
I love them all. I definitely will love that episode. I also will say to you that the way you're describing it made me come to a conclusion or a statement that it's entertaining history. Number one, you're making it in a way that is entertaining to watch. You're not bored in any way, shape, or form. But in addition to that, you've got some amazing writers that are, like we hear, like you said, you hear that topic and you go, okay, that's the burnings. You don't know because you just hear the bottom line to get the question right in history in 11th grade or something, whatever. And here we're getting, what? Wait a minute. Why would they do that? Why would they be so stupid? Or were they stupid? Were they not stupid per se for the day, but were they misguided? Were they miseducated? Were they fearful? Was it us against them? Just like there's so much of history is just making up an us versus them. No matter what civilization there is, there's always a them that's the enemy, right? So like, I don't know, like, how do we not make people the enemy and so forth? And I think there's lots of different perspectives on all the shows you do, different, and it's like a bad thing to say that you learn a lesson. It's not. You learn a nice lesson in each of these as well if you're open to that. And if you don't want to learn a lesson, you can learn, well, what really was that? Did they burn them? Oh, they didn't? Well, why not? And so forth. To deconstruct, like you said, to get to the heart of it. So your writers have got to be different, because usually maybe we perceive history writers as we're going to write the novel and it's, in this date this happened, on that date that happened, and that's it. You've got some writers that are saying, no, I want to take a different angle on this and teach it a different way. Is that what happened? Is there some thought on set, so to speak, or behind the scenes that that's what they wanted to do? Yeah.
So the writers at Committee Films are both historians and they're script writers, like they're screenwriters. A lot of them have written for fiction programs before. And so what they do is they take that and they kind of first get the historical narrative correct, and then they map over it what was likely said and in the dialect that it was said. You know, they're not going to say things the same in the 1600s as they do in 2000s. They're going to say things differently. They're going to have a little bit more of an Elizabethan tone to it. There's going to be more biblical references because that was more prevalent at that time. And so all of these things they bring to the fore. And we also have so many books written on each of these subjects, and they do a deep dive into this, and it takes months to prepare for every single episode. But the team is big enough that they condense the time and they bring you something that even your history buffs are going to be like, I was hoping they were going to talk about that. I'm so glad they did. So, yeah, that's how you vivify history and bring it to life.
I love that. Vivify history. That actually is exactly right. It really is. I Was There, History Channel. I mean, we all have the downloads and the DVRs and everything else. So the time isn't as important as it was. Set the DVR number 1 so you'll never miss it. But I see it on History Channel Monday nights at 9 o'clock. It is
9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Mountain.
There you go. That's why it's difficult to I thank you for doing that, because it is difficult with all the different times. So that's why I say check out for it, and you really will enjoy it. I also want to talk about briefly when we come back a couple of things, one of which is the law of action and how, if anything, your theme of that book, which really it's way too simple to just focus it on a one sentence, but the bottom line is, it's nice to have the law of attraction and kind of think of and hope things happen for the best in your life, but you also say, is it time to dive in and actually do? And I want to see if that had any effect upon you getting this job as the host of I Was There. We'll be back right at this and Everything Old is New Again with Theo Wilson.
My name is Theo Wilson. We're taking the biggest turning points in history and dissecting the lost surprises of what happened. You have to see it to believe it. And now you will.
I Was There with Theo Wilson, a new series.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
May 3rd, 1953. Ralph Cramden in search for money, for capital, to enter his no-cal pizzeria. Says, I have a surefire plan of getting the money. It can't fail. Alice Cramden says no, unquote. All things are as they were then, except you are there.
Oh, sure. Back here, Everything Old is New Again, one of our favorite shows, The Honeymooners, and one of our new favorite shows, I Was There, hosted by Theo Wilson. We've got The Honeymooners there talking about You Are There, which we mentioned in our last section, but I just wanted to show how the idea of this was part of the pop culture back in the early 50s. Again, this show improves upon the past so well. I can't recommend it enough. If you want to learn about, or even just see some interesting discussion of the Space Shuttle Challenger, the assassination of Abe Lincoln, the Battle of Stalingrad. Gee, what the heck was that? Let's learn about that. How about the 1965 Bloody Sunday attack in Alabama, attempting to suppress the black vote? There's so much here that we're hoping that this goes not just 12, but 212 episodes at least. So watch this show and maybe shoot a note. You can do it so easily now to History Channel. Say, listen, I love this show. Can we see some more? Because that's what needs to be done, I think, in some ways. The powers that be always like to hear some feedback. That's for sure. Am I right?
Yeah.
It can't hurt. We're here with Theo Wilson talking about this. I just left off with a discussion briefly. He has a book called The Law of Action. Basically says that staying mentally focused on what you want and where you want to go and how to attract what you want is all fine and dandy. But at some point in time, there's an action factor. There are powerful tools in our mind and in our spiritual growth, and we can roll up our sleeves and actually go ahead and do. And I wanted to see, first of all, tell us a smidge about the law of action, and did that kind of theme of let me roll my sleeves up and do have any effect upon you getting the getting the job as hosting this great show, I Was There?
Thank you very much, Doug. It certainly did. So I wrote The Law of Action after I was disappointed about The Secret. I'm not trying to denigrate the product. I'm just saying I tried the vision boards and whatnot, and nothing really happened.
Right.
And then I was on YouTube, and a lot of the people in the movie started putting these corrections out. Like, remember when we said the universe is a genie and your wish is my command and it's like a menu, just order what you want? May not actually happen like that. And so there's these 7 hermetic principles, and there's some old teachings around the law of attraction. And one of the old teachings really said, act and ye shall attract. Not vision board, not visualize, not imagine really, really intensely, but act. And I was like, oh, okay. So attraction is like gliding. How do you get in the air in the first place? How do you climb? How do you flap your wings? Moreover, how do you make yourself a better recipient for the thing you're trying to attract? In the law of action, I found it to be painfully simple, but very, very necessary. A man of action was my grandfather, Theobald Wilson. And I write about this. There's a History Channel article that I spoke about him in. And Theobald Wilson was good with his hands, both when it came to building and when it came to breaking. He could throw them. He could fight. He was somebody who was born into tough times, and he was even tougher. And what it was that there's this action factor that he was always in motion with. And that kind of set a culture in my family whereby we were always somebody who would be prompt and on time, somebody you could count on, somebody who was dependable. And of course, that came from his military background. My father's a Vietnam vet. I never went to the military, but I was raised in a military family. And so action is sometimes the root of what's bad and good in the universe. In the first chapter, I'll talk about the bad things that happen and why do they keep happening. And the fact is that there's this something here in the physical world that action takes precedence, whether it's good or bad. Now, action has equal and opposite reactions, so be careful about that, because just because you did it don't mean it was the right thing to do. I break that down as well. But by the time it came for me to be on these auditions, talking to the people at Committee Films about getting this job as the host if I was there, one of the things they found me as is the things my grandfather taught me. Dependable, sharp, impeccable with my word, always making sure that I did what I said I was going to do. And when I said I was going to do it, those things kind of led to the relationships that I built. And they asked me, for example, because there's a lot of physical stuff that I have to do. Are you in shape? Yes, I am. Like, I work out 6 days a week, and that's something that my father and grandfather also did. Led to longevity, and so it's just one of those things that I'm glad I got into my being. I wrote all about it there. I'll just say also, I wrote a public speaking program right after that, because there's the doing and then there's the speaking. So it's called SpitfirePublicSpeaking.com. So with SpitfirePublicSpeaking.com, I teach about how to actually stand in front of an audience and command a crowd and get your point across and do it with clarity and with kinetic energy. All of that leads to what led to the success, and I was there. So I used both of those, Law of Action and Spitfire Public Speaking, to create this outcome, and I'm really happy that I did. So yeah.
And I'm happy we talked about it because it is important and it's a great lesson to get involved with both of those. I have a little something here. Hopefully this hits the mark on the next topic I want to talk about for a moment.
An extraordinary day at the barbershop.
I need a cut. A little off the top, long in the back, but not quite no shag. Slope to the left like Gumby. Eddie Monster in the front, a little White Cliff on the right. Come on, hook that up for me.
Yo, daddy, he believed that something as simple as a little haircut could change where a man felt on the inside. We can't talk straight in the barbershop, then where can we talk straight?
There's a little something from Barbershop. If you haven't seen that movie, that's a blast. And besides that, I play that for a reason with Theo Wilson, and it just want to talk a little bit about Shop Talk Live, and that's shoptalkdenver.com if you want to find information about it. Tell me a little bit about that project, and did that film represent in some way, sort of what you're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the African American community, the barbershop is one of the places where men just let themselves be, man. We let all hang out. We tell the truth. And it's a place where it's like a hub. It's community discussion. So I'm going to take you back to 2004 and 2005. I was part of a organization called CORE. And one of the initiatives was to rebuild trust in our communities. And we feel that, I'm going to speak from first person, grew up under the shadow of gang violence. There was something in my environment that was always haunting my very safety, even when I was a kid. And it was the threat of being caught in a crossfire in a gang war that I grew up in. And because of that, because the trust bonds were so eroded, we had to figure out a way to have really important discussions. And we decided that the barbershop was going to be the best gathering place and place to launch a community forum that we could find right there. And so it used to be all men only, we go into the barbershop and it's just the lion's den, men, men, right? But then we realized that there was conversations that needed to be had among the women in our community as well. And so there was a great growth of community initiatives that came out of Barbershop Talk, which ended up becoming Shop Talk Live. And the idea just kind of took on a life of its own, but we gather, we organize, and we make things better just by starting to have conversation.
And isn't that what it's all about? I mean, it's important to have, and sometimes in this day and age, I hate to say it, the younger, hate to sound like an old fart, say the younger generation, but you see so many people just on the computer, on the phone, and they don't even pick up the phone to actually have a conversation. So at the very least, this is a meeting of people that are actually having conversation eye to eye, and I think something more comes from that, developing relationships, developing an understanding. And by the way, it's okay to disagree, isn't it? As long as we disagree civilly and have a conversation, say, I don't agree with this plan of action, and here's why, and then the other person can explain their point of view. That I think is helpful. And sometimes in our world, sometimes everyone gets shut down. Like, I don't want to hear that person talk. That's why I love this project, because you're opening the conversation, no matter what the conversation is. In the barbershop, I think it sounds like almost like, it's a safe place to talk about what we want to talk about. Let's go there, It's okay. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. And so a lot of the stuff that I teach in Spitfire Public Speaking, I honed in the barbershop talks. When you talk about controversial discussions, things that have a lot of energy and heat around them. One of the things that I've decided and I started to practice doing there was researching both sides of the argument until I got an emotional understanding of why somebody would be passionately committed to this perspective. And so then being able to have those discussions from a neutral, balanced point of view led to me being able to kind of lead from behind in a way, asking facilitating questions that opened the door in a way that would fill in the dialogue by the people who were participating. And so that's one of the things that I really got out of that. And I had to do that in real time, man. You know, like in the barbershop in the neighborhoods I was working these out in, you could have the mayor or a 3-time felon walk right in. I remember there was a discussion where there was a woman who came in and her son wanted to join the gang life. My co-facilitator had a friend of his who just got out from serving 10 years Fed time. So this young man who wanted to join the gang life got to sit across from this OG who already went down the roughest possible road, and he broke that boy in 40 minutes. He no longer wanted anything to do with the gang life, and that saved his life. So these were the kind of conversations that we were able to have. When it came to issues that we were having with the police in the community, we didn't just talk about them, we talked to them. Mm-hmm. Like we brought in like sergeants, and we brought in people who were police trainers, people who had been involved in rough incidents in the community, and we had those dialogues right there, which creates more safety for both sides of that debate. We ain't talking about black lives, we're talking about blue lives. We're talking about the people in this community who need to know each other as human beings. And that's the kind of organization we're able to do with the barbershops.
Love it. ShopTalkDenver.com to get more information about that. And, of course, the time has just flown, and we've had a great time with Theo Wilson, host of I Was There on History Channel. You're going to enjoy it. Thank you so much for your time, Theo.
Thank you so much, Doug.
We'll be back next week on Everything Old is New Again. Continue talking pop culture.